very comfortable. That's right. Excellent. Barney. We are rolling, and anytime you're ready.
Ready to go.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to tell you that working on this project has been really amazing to me because it's brought back many, many memories that I thought were lost and gone. It's brought back a lot of fun, and I've approached it 1,000 different ways. And none of the approaches have stuck as the way to do it. And so what I have done is just continue on trying to get as much information as I could to you without boring you to death. And I realized after I stopped yesterday that there were so many things that I would love to bring out, and there's no way, unless I did about 10 hours and you'd never look at it, to get it all done. So I may be a little sketchy and I may run from here to there, but just run with me because I'm not going to try to organize it any at all. Told you yesterday a lot about what it was like growing up and when the boys went off to war and Verna went off to school. The thought occurred to me a while ago that there were events in our lives that had a profound impact and were probably more life-changing than others. One of which was Verna's going to college and Bob going into service. Because all of a sudden our world expanded. And it not only expanded in terms of places, but of ideas and other people's thoughts. There were just so many ways that Bob and Verna both brought back a lot to the family. Bob talked to faraway places that I couldn't even imagine. And Verna brought back ideas that I had never heard. And all of it together. And I thought about it, even the influence on our music. Now, prior to their leaving, as best I remember, I know my grandmammy could play a harmonica, Mama could play the piano, Daddy could play the guitar, and I remember way, way back about Mom and Daddy square dancing with a small group. And I remember being in a barn where they had swept away the hay, and they were square dancing and having a wonderful time. And I remember Bob and Ralph playing the guitar. We were probably narrow to hymns, folk songs, and country music in the beginning. I remember Bob coming back with the big band and songs that we'd never heard, and we began to try to learn, and we did pick up and listen and learn. I know the words now to more songs back in the 40s than I do the 80s, 90s, or 2000. Our music went from country to contemporary to classical, and many back to country. So I think most of us today have a pretty good appreciation for music in a lot of different varieties. There are so many tales that I could tell, and I'm sure the children and grandchildren have heard, and so much that I guess some of it best be left to the mamas and daddies to pass it on down. But I know it was life-changing when Bob and Verna came home. I remember the one that always touched me most was Bob coming home. He had been away, seemed like about 14 months, and we hadn't heard from him. Not allowed to get or send mail. And one morning I went to the kitchen, and Mama was singing, and she just looked unusually happy. And as others came in and she was asked about it, she said, "My boy's coming home. My boy's coming home." And we were a little concerned because we hadn't heard, didn't know, and she was just so sure of it. And it was a couple of days, I guess. I remember that she and Addie and Verna, I believe, were in the dining room cutting out fabric. And I may be getting times mixed up, so let me stop there. Because what I remember more is Bob talking about getting a bumming ride from Goldsboro to Belfast. He came in on the train, I believe, and then the bus maybe. Then he bummed a ride, and then he had to walk. And it was cold and dark. It was during the night. And he was very, very tired, but he was also very excited. And I remember his telling when he got close enough that he could see the umbrella of trees over the house. He started running. I cry every time I hear that, and I guess it strikes that chord of being away and the joy of being back. But it's a wonderful story. It tells a lot about all of us. I remember when he hit the steps coming in, everybody got out of bed. It was almost automatic. It's like we didn't have to wait to be called. His presence woke us all up. And I can't tell you the joy of Mama. Her boy was home, and he'd been so far away for so long. We experienced that several times while he was in service. His coming home, Verna coming home, Ralph went into service, his coming home. Then Jay went into service. He was in the Korean War, and I remember, again, that same kind of joy when we had got a telephone call today. And most of you are not familiar with, at that time we had, when we got a telephone, it was back in 1950, I believe. But there were 8 families on one line. And you didn't dial a number, you picked up and asked the operator, gave the operator your number. And most of the time, by the time you started talking, you could hear the background in the different houses along the road. But we got a call. The operator told us that, wow, at a certain time that afternoon, we would get a call from Jay. Stop just a moment. The operator told us that we would get a call from Jay in Korea. And she called all the other parties on the line and told them to stay off the line. We had an opportunity to call Verna and Wilson. She and George came flying to Goldsboro. And when Jay called, I believe it's one of the happiest moments of my life. We all got a chance to talk to him, just a few words. But I heard his voice, and that's what meant so much to me. And I remember later we laughingly talked about that one phone call at that time was $117. And it was worth twice that much. We all kicked in and helped pay for it. But it was a wonderful time. And I remember, I believe that was a life-changing for us. To be that far away and in a war that was very difficult. And to get a call, you know. I remember when we got word that he was coming home, I went through several days of the most dreadful days of my life almost, because I feared that something would happen to him, he would never get home. I want to tell you too about Jay. Before he went back to Korea, before we went to Korea, was the first year that our family drew names at Christmas. And Jay came to me and told me that he had drawn my name, gave me $50, and said, you cannot spend it for anything other than something for you. And that was my first outfit, store-bought outfit from top to bottom. and I shall always treasure it. I shall always treasure it. And found out at Christmas he had not drawn my name at all. Jay was good to me in a lot of ways. Let me get back on track again. But in 41 to 45, I think was a time for all of us of growing up. I know that when Bob came home, he was totally amazed at how much how much everybody had grown. I was in my clumsy developing years, and I felt like the loner in the group, and I probably was. But I remember he thought Chris was the prettiest thing he'd ever seen, and she was. And she still is. But in addition to the things they taught us, Verna and Bob both adhered to the values that were passed down through the family. That of honesty, decency, kindness, gentleness, dependability. Just a lot of the good, solid things that they reinforced, and they helped reinforce it most for us by showing us rather than talking about it. They emulated all of those things, and they were certainly good models for all of us. Now, I thought about, too, in 1949, I believe, was the year that Elder Gerald Pate and his family came into our lives. And in looking back, I think that was another time that it was such a profound impact on all of us. They were very loving, and they loved our whole family. They would come out once or twice a week, have dinner with us, whatever. And just their presence contributed a lot to our well-being. And I believe in the process, their unconditional love, and that's certainly what they gave us, probably did more for my self-esteem than most anything ever had. And I thought, too, about the relationships that we were taught. In our family, we had, of course, not much religion because we didn't have a church, and Mom and Dad are different in their beliefs, and we didn't go to church nor Sunday school, but there was never an absence of a loving God in our lives. And talking about the realization, we didn't say grace at every meal, I don't believe, but I know sometimes we did. But it was always, we were taught what was right and what was wrong, and that do unto others, not before they did unto you, but as. That was pretty strong influence. I think, too, of the games that we played as children and how that changed with our growing up and Verna being in physical ed training. As little children, of course, we didn't have money to buy things. We didn't have store-bought anything, hardly. But we were very creative in making up our own games and developing our own ways of doing things, and it kept us pretty occupied. We did the children's games of marbles and giant step and rover, hell over. I can't even remember, yeah. But we'd throw the ball over the house, and one team would go and try. And of course, one of the more popular and one we all remember a lot is kick the can. And a lot of the games we played taught us a lot of how to interact with one another, the fairness of it all. And if they were here to tell you, the boys would tell you that I usually got most of their marbles. I was a better shot than most of them. We also had almost enough for a basketball team and a baseball team, and it was not too uncommon in spring and summer for us to lose a few windows in the living room and bedroom from playing ball in the front yard. But most of us were very athletic and thoroughly enjoyed the game playing. We had neighbors, and let me tell you a little about our neighbors. I guess Joe Pate and his family, Dorch Harrison and his family. Edwin was the Harrison and Janet was the Pate. The Summerlins that lived on the east side of us, they had children and we were all kind of together in that. The Costons, the older family, were more in tune with the Costons. Then we had the black people that lived around us and worked in the fields with us. And I remember there was a lot of talk about Aunt Debbie, whom I did not know, but whom the older ones talked about running away and being with. And I remember the story that she and Mama had babies about the same time. It's the year that Addie was born. And Addie was crying a lot. And Aunt Debbie one day said, "Miss Betty, I believe your baby's hungry." Said, "If you don't mind her nursing me, we can check it out." And she did. And Addie went off to sleep and slept so long until it scared Mama. She woke her up to see if she was okay. But we had that kind of relationship with the black people and they with us. We were taught that their souls were just as white as ours, that we were to respect them just as much as anybody else. And there was no difference between the way we interacted with the black people than the white people when we were working. The difference was on the weekends we didn't socialize. But I remember the big boy